Good evening. It is warm here. This is my makeup room. We have never filmed in my makeup room before, but it's 10 o'clock at night. I've got my ring light out and I want to talk about the books that I have read over the last month or so. I haven't been doing a wrap up. I've been lazy as hell, really just feeling a bit blood, a bit down and stuff. And then I think a lot of things on book Twitter I need to learn to ignore because it really did sort of affect my morale, I suppose. So yeah, it's warm, I'm irritable, just saying. So we're going to talk about the books I have read this month. Now, I've read quite a few. I go through phases where I read a lot of horror on Kindle Unlimited, which I did this month. It's a procrastination thing that I do sometimes when I'm putting off reading books that I actually should be reading. So the first one I read was Devil's Island by Mark Lukens. And again, this was a Kindle Unlimited number. It's about a film crew that visit an island, I love Devil's Island, and there's a whole thing with this haunted hotel and the Fountain of Youth. I mean, it was pretty decent. I thought I gave it, 3 stars? It was pretty solid. It only took me an hour to read, so if you're looking for something quick, it's the equivalent of watching the movie The Haunting, if you get what I mean. Kind of cheesy, but good. And then I read The Invasion of the Turling by Erika Johansson. I gave this 5 stars. I loved it. I loved this one and I loved the first one. Ignore the Gadget bit on my fan. And I really thought it was great. I love politics. I love the world building. I liked the character. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. I gave it 5 stars and the rating will stay 5 stars, even though I am really annoyed with this series now. So after that, I read Heckler's Children by James Brogden. Now, this started off with a really great premise. Now, I'm super into folk horror. I love the sort of, what's in the woods and all that kind of stuff. I was watching a film the other day called A Field in England, which had a really folk horror, psychedelic feel. It was great. Heckler's Children I ended up giving 2 stars. Now, the first half of the book I would have given a solid 3.5, but the last quarter of the book was just nonsensical. I thought that, the premise was great, that I don't know if you know anything about bog people, but people that were sacrificed for the community, and look up Windlow Man and stuff like that. And I thought the premise in the beginning, like I've said about 3 times now, was great, but the ending just didn't stick. And sometimes endings come out of nowhere and they're really satisfying and you think, wow, I didn't see that coming. But once you know about it, you see the build up in the book, you see where the foreshadowing was. I really didn't feel that way about Heckler's Children. I felt like the ending just came out of nowhere and sort of plopped, it didn't stick the ending. So after that, I was still on the hunt for some satisfying folk horror, and I read The Plague Stones, also by James Brogden, and this one was better, solid 3.5 stars. And it involves the ceremony of the beating of the bounds. So people in, especially England, I don't think Scotland used to do it, but they would go around the parish boundaries at certain times of year and do prayers and things like that to sort of keep the evil spirits out. And this is a great book about a village that is basically trapped within itself because they did something bad during the plague, and they're haunted by the spirits of some of the plague victims. Really solid, 3.5 stars. I think it would make a great wave movie. So yeah. And then I read The Broken Kingdoms by N.K. Jemisin. I gave this one 5 stars, guys. I've done a full review of it, and I think I've recommended the Inheritance trilogy to pretty much everyone that I have spoken to, but I'll recommend it again, and I'll also link my video in the cards. It is a world where gods live among humans, and they remind me a little bit of the Greek pantheon in the sense that they are very sort of earthy gods. Anyway, I loved it. I loved the main character of Yin, and you should all go and read it right away. So after that, I read a couple of novellas. I read Binti by Nnedi Okorafor. This one was really interesting, really great sort of, not hard sci-fi, yeah. And it's about a woman called Binti who leaves her home on Earth to go and study at a really prestigious sort of interstellar university. And on the ship on the way there, something happens to all the people on the ship with her, and she ends up almost being an ambassador for this alien species that nobody else really understands. I thought the premise, I'm going to say this a million times in this video, I thought the premise was fantastic. I thought they really followed up on it really well. And even though it was a novella, it packed so much story into such a short novella. I was so impressed, and I'm definitely going to read the rest in the series. And then I read The Empress of Salt and Fortune by Nevo. I'll need to Google that again, and if it's wrong I will correct myself on the screen. The Empress of Salt and Fortune is another novella. It had the feel almost of, they do mention The Handmaid's Tale when they're talking about it, and I can really see why, because it is about women who are fighting back against like a patriarchal system that basically reduces them to the children that they can produce. And it's about the beautiful relationship between Rabbit and the Empress, and it's all being told as a story to a non-binary character who is also a monk with a talking bird. So there's going to be another one apparently in the series, and I'm quite chuffed about that. Again, I will go on and read some more. Then was my biggest disappointment, I would say, of the year so far. This is my biggest disappointment of the year, and it was The Fate of the Turling by Erika Johansson. Guys, I can't even express to you how disappointed I was when I reached the end of this book. Like, I loved the first two so much, and then I got to the end, and yeah, spoilers for this. If you're going to read it, just skip past this part. But basically, there's always been time travel involved in the stories, and the main character was always like seeing things that had happened in the past through magical means, and you always kind of got the sense that, you know, it was to show her how to do things better in the future. However, we get to the last, I would say, third of the book, and I started to get a sinking feeling because of the way that it was going. And then they pulled a Dallas on us. Like, basically she goes back in time and prevents it all from happening, which I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I find that so lazy, because it just undoes all of the consequences of the previous books and just kind of makes you feel like, well, what was the point? Why did I spend all that time reading it when they were just going to do that? So I know other people feel the same as me, and I'm not alone in that opinion. Some people liked it, some people thought it was different and good. I thought it was different and bad. So Then I read, let me see, Find Me by Anne Fraser, which is the first book in the Inland Empire series. And this one was about, pardon me, in this one there's a woman whose father was a serial killer, and it's kind of affected her whole life, blah blah blah. It was kind of formulaic, and I didn't like the ending. I thought the ending was pretty ridiculous. Like, this poor woman, like, everyone in her family apart from her is a serial killer. It was just so bizarre. I gave it 2 stars because I was just like, no. And then I read a Mary Grant novella. I read Final Girls. This was really interesting. It was about, well, it is about a company who are using like virtual reality as therapy. So they put you into VR, and then you sort of live through a trauma, and it helps you overcome that trauma. It was really interesting, and it had a lot of tension and stakes. I really like Sean Maguire / Mary Grant's writing, and this was no exception really. And then I read one of my favourite books of the year so far. I have the physical copy here, and it was Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. And this is a Gothic Grand Guignol tale. If you like Edgar Allan Poe or any of that sort of Hellbound Heart, if you like any of those sort of Gothic stories, you will really like Mexican Gothic. I'm not going to spoil it because I think everyone should read it, but I really loved the main character of Noemi. And I, as a person who had done anthropology, I loved the way that Silvia Moreno Garcia sort of put in all that eugenics stuff and talking about like the skull measuring and things, and it was just like, oh, you could just feel it. And basically in this, the disease is colonialism, which is always the disease. But if you like, in fact, do you know what else I would say? If you liked Crimson Peak, you'd really like this. I think it would be, again, I think this would make a brilliant movie, sort of Guillermo del Toro thing. It would be great if we could get some nice sort of maybe unknown Mexican actress to play Noemi. It would be great. So if anyone knows any good Mexican actresses that should play Noemi, then please let me know about them, because I would like to watch their work. And then I read, let me see, The Guinevere Deception by Kirsten White, and I had been putting this off for months. I've had that book for ages and I just hadn't read it. I gave it 4 stars with reservations, and my reservations are always to do with if someone is on the side of like getting rid of magic or something like that. I absolutely do not like that. I'm never going to side with the character who wants to get rid of magic, so we'll need to see what happens in the next couple of books and see if it goes the way that I hope or think it's going to go. I think a few people have read the arc, but I don't want any spoilers, so I'll just need to find out for myself. And then I read The Star-Touched Queen by Roshani Chokshi. I gave this 4.5 stars, round up to 5. Really loved it. It was a great take on the Hades and Persephone myth, but set in the sort of Mughal-inspired setting that I'm coming to really, really enjoy. The main character is born under a bad star, and she has suffered all her life because of it. She has a bad horoscope, and she eventually enters an arranged marriage, basically to get away from it. It's great and you should read it. I'm not going to give any more spoilers. Then we read The Royal We. Read The Tiger's Daughter by Kate Arsenal Rivera. I gave this 5 stars, and I will probably do a standalone review of it, so I'm not going to talk too much about it. But basically it is about two women who are warriors, whose mothers were warriors, whose mothers were best friends, and they are prophesied to save the Empire, and also they are in love. It is brilliant, and I have the sequel to Phoenix Empress waiting to be read. I can't wait. So after that, I was still on a sort of sapphic book kick, and I read Girls of Paper and Fire by Natasha Nyan. This is a YA fantasy. I enjoyed it. I thought it was really good. I gave it 3.5 stars, and I will read the sequel, but I don't really have much to say about it other than that. Then we had some history, and it was Royal Witches from Joan of Navarre to Elizabeth Woodville. Just double checking the title that I got it right. Yeah, from Joan of Navarre to Elizabeth Woodville. And this basically covers the women, basically from like a great grandmother down to the great granddaughter, through the sort of turmoil of the Wars of the Roses and things like that. And basically each of them were accused at one point of witchcraft for varying reasons. Like Joan of Navarre was accused of witchcraft basically so her stepson could take her money because he was broke and wanted to go to war, you know, all that kind of stuff. It was really good history, a lot of stuff I didn't know about Elizabeth Woodville. It's a really interesting period in English history, and I think you would enjoy it if you enjoy biographies of sort of royal women. And then, yeah, I keep going. I read so much. I didn't think I had read that much, but I actually really did. I read Touch of Darkness by Scarlett St. Clair, and if that isn't a pseudonym, I'll eat a hat. This is a Hades and Persephone retelling, but it's like a modern one, and it's set in a world where the Greek gods sort of descended from Mount Olympus and are living among humans. And Persephone is the goddess of spring. Her mother is still Demeter, but she's really bad at being a goddess. She's never managed to sort of harness her powers, and she thinks that she's just a really bad goddess. And then, of course, she meets Hades. Stuff happens. It's like a paranormal romance urban with gods. Now, I did enjoy the first book, but I did start the second one and haven't continued it so far because I just got sick of the jealousy and insecurity of the main character. Like, you can understand a lot of it, but eventually I was just like, can we have some different conflict, please? I'm kind of tired, you know? It's one of those ones where, like, the guy clearly adores the woman beyond all reason and sense, but she's still, like, you know, jealous of every other woman that comes in contact with him, which I just find exhausting. So then I read Kingsbane by Claire Legrand. This is the sequel to Furyborn. And oh my god, I can't believe I have to wait until October for Lightbringer. Oh my gosh. That's all I have to say on that one. And then I picked up There Will Come a Darkness by Katie Rose Poole. Gave it 3 stars. Wasn't super keen. Felt like the book was mainly sort of set up, really. I felt like not much happened until the last maybe 50 pages, and I don't think that I will continue on with the series, sadly. So then I decided to pick up some trashy romance, as my husband called it. I picked up One Dance with the Duke by Tessa Dare, and in classic Tessa Dare fashion, there was a sassy heroine, there was an emotionally closed off hero, and there just was great stuff. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Yeah, it was Tess Dare. I always like her romances, especially her Regency ones, and I think I've got quite a few. I've got quite a few of her other books still waiting to be read. Then I finally got around to The Girl in the Tower by Catherine Arden. Gave it 4 stars. It's a continuation on from The Bear and the Nightingale, set in Russia, and y'all, this series just keeps on getting better and better. I really love Vazia. I loved the supporting characters, and I'm interested to see what happens with the romance in this book, so let's find out what happens. Then I read Three Dark Crowns by Kendall Blake, and I gave that 4 stars. Really liked it, good start. I thought it had the right balance of setup to actual plot, and I really did become invested in the 3 main like sister characters and what was happening to them, and I felt quite sorry for them, to be honest. So then I read some more non-fiction. I read Empress of the East by Leslie P. Pierce, and that one is about Roxolana, also known as Hurrem Sultan. She was an empress of the Ottoman Empire. She was the first woman that an Ottoman actually married. The Ottomans had a system whereby they would have concubines, usually slaves, and once that particular concubine had one son, then she never slept with the sultan again, and her entire job was to raise her son, and eventually her son would take up like a governorship in the empire, and she would go with him and be his advisor, etc. But with Hurrem Sultan Suleiman broke that tradition. He married Roxolana Hurrem, and she had 5 children, including 6, including 5 sons, and all the different sort of conflict that this raised for her, because she had more than one son to sort of try and help towards the throne. The Ottoman Empire weren't like the sort of European royal houses that practice primogeniture, whereby the oldest son inherits. They were basically a holdover from the sort of Khanate, the Mongolian Khans, and every able-bodied son could inherit. So it was kind of very almost Game of Thronesy fights to the death, and really interesting. She was a very interesting woman. Obviously, she had a bad start to life, being enslaved, but she really rose to high station, and I thoroughly enjoyed the book, and I thoroughly enjoyed reading how her imprint basically was made to the Ottoman Empire. And she really reminded me of Theodora, the Byzantine Empress, who was like an actress who became the Empress, and I'm looking for a good biography of Theodora if anyone has one. So yeah. And I'm also going to be reading one about Noor Jahan. It cropped up in the other book that I read this month that I haven't mentioned yet, which is Daughters of the Sun by Ira Chakraborty, and that covered all the royal Mughal women, the Begums, the Sultanas, everything like that. That was also very interesting. Gave that 5 stars. And then lastly, this month I read The Guest List by Lucy Foley, which was a really nice, tight sort of locked room thriller, but it was on an island, and it was based around a wedding, this very posh wedding that's happening, and all the guests coming together, and someone is murdered, of course, and it sort of works its way backwards, so you don't find out immediately who it was or anything like that. And I really liked it. I thoroughly enjoyed the ending, and I have picked up Lucy Foley's debut. This, I think, was her sophomore book, but I've now picked up her debut because I enjoyed it so much. So that is everything I've read in the past 4 weeks. It was a lot, not gonna lie, and I will probably read much more because I've just been picking up a lot of non-fiction, and I tend to go through non-fiction really, really quickly. Sometimes quicker than I go through fiction, but we'll see. So anyway, that is everything that I read in basically July. Yeah, July. So yeah, that's all from me. Wear your mask, stay safe, stay well. Bye.